Napa know-how.
Why save $20 on a Napa automotive battery? Because nobody likes bad starts. You know, like forgetting your job interviewer's name or saying I love you on a first date. So get a good start with a Napa automotive battery at your local Napa Auto Parts store or Auto Care Center. Plus, get $20 back. Quality parts, helpful people. That's Napa know-how. Tap the banner to learn more. At participating locations, exclusions apply. May not be combined with other offers. Offer ends 7/31/21.
Hey, thanks for listening to our podcast. If you want to listen live in the central Indiana area, you can hear us on 93.5 FM and 107.5 FM.
Known this guy for about 20 years, and as I said earlier, no show prep needed. Just get Rake on the phone and we'll talk. Greg Rakestraw, U-Indy's finest. We got a young man from U-Indy in here now, Ryan, running the board, running the show, and you're his role model, and he's looking up to what you've done. So with that introduction, Rake, what's going on?
First of all, tell Ryan to set the bar higher. I appreciate that, but you aim a little higher there, Willis. Secondly, are you still basking in the afterglow of one of the 19 different places you went to college, winning a national championship last week?
Thank you, Rake. By the way, Rake's on the drive. Hubler, wait a minute. What's it called? Is this the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline? See,
yeah.
I remembered that. Rake, as someone like you who's made a career out of sports and loved sports your whole life, and as we just heard on the caller previous to this, when you've had so much disappointment and so much pain, you've dreamed about getting to the mountaintop. When it finally happens, you just don't know what to do. You don't know how to feel. And as I said, I cried. I couldn't believe it.
When I heard that last week, it was one of those things I'm like, they have been around and been a power in college baseball, obviously because of Ron Polk and Dudy Noble Field and the left field lounge and things like that. You're like, when you had heard they hadn't won a national, you're like, really? They hadn't won a national championship? Because they have been so good and one of the schools that have taken the sport so seriously for so long. So for you and the rest of one of the best fan bases in the country, I'm very happy that they were a national champion as of last Wednesday night.
Yeah, Rake, that's what. Yeah, so much tradition, so many guys in the majors, but never had to have won it. It reminds you, one, how hard it is to win that thing. It's not like, it's not like the March Madness where, okay, you just have to beat that team once. You have to beat these good teams oftentimes twice, and that's what State had to do. And then you get into that, you're working about your bullpens and depth, and guys need to step up. So it's crazy. But I'm glad you mentioned watching the broadcast because you've done so many games. And if you've done this, I'm not picking on you, but it's one of my the hugest pet peeve. So they're showing all these Mississippi State fans, and they say a lot of folks made the trip from Starkville, or if the Titans are in town, hey, a lot of fans made the trip from Nashville, as if Titans fans only reside in Nashville, or Mississippi State fans are only allowed to reside in Starkville. You can say, hey, a lot of Bulldog fans in the house, but you don't have to. Guess where they're from and assume they all got together on a big bus and came together.
I think I'm allowed to do that a little bit more because I predominantly reside in the high school space.
Exactly.
So literally when I see a team at the semi-state or the state championship game, I can question, is there anybody in Montgomery today? Because I think they're all up here at Bankers Life Fieldhouse when Bar Reeve wins a state championship. And I knew that half of Lanesville was at Victory Field when we won a baseball state final some 4 years ago. So I think I'm allowed to do that more at the high school level than, say, at the collegiate level or the professional level. How about that?
It is funny because when you think about, we were talking about Notre Dame earlier, and they've got fans across the country, if not across the globe. So when you don't say, hey, a lot of folks made the trip from South Bend. So in this day and age, you're allowed to be fans all over the place. And, if I would have been at, in Omaha, I would have been lumped into one of those people that had made the trip from Starkville. And also another one of my pet peeves, Rake, when announcers say that pass is incomplete and they'll be forced to punt. You're never forced to punt. They don't make you punt on fourth down. You choose to punt. It's it makes sense. Like 4th and 19, more than likely you're going to punt, but no one is forcing you to punt, Rake.
All right, I'm writing this down before I do the Colts preseason. So I'll piss off Chris Hagan.
You know what? Now that I've said that, thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you.
They'll go the punt route. They'll bring on the punt team. Now that I've said this out loud, Rake, and you were privy to this, I'm going to have my phone out, and if you slip on one of those, you're getting a text. Yeah. You're getting a text in the middle of the game.
I am literally. First of all, I look forward to you texting me during any broadcast.
Thank you.
What I'm doing at any point in time. I crave feedback, both positive and negative, and that's fine. Feel free to send it my way. I will literally make sure, I will write it in my game notes, that on the first Colts punt of the preseason, I will use the phrase, the Colts are electing to punt on 4th down.
And then there'll be somebody, a viewer at home, going, well, of course, dummy. What else are they going to do? And so it's like you can never make all the people happy.
And then when I get ripped on Twitter, I will literally CC Chris Hagan, Fox 59, or whatever your Twitter handle is these days. It comes up automatically, so I'll make sure I tag the right Chris Hagan.
Thank you.
I will include you in on the reference.
Thank you. Well, Rake, as you know, I was pulled in from the bullpen earlier today. I thought I was 4 days in between starts, but they yanked me out to go give a couple innings for JMV. So they said who my guests were. It was you and Holder. So no two people would I want to have on to make me feel in a safe place to talk to than you two guys. Was there anything in particular that you were booked today to talk about? Because you have your feet dipped in so many pools. You're all over the place. You look up, I hear you on the radio, I see you on TV. So is there something in particular we're discussing today?
Well, usually since it's John, there's some sort of Southern Indiana reference that is thrown in at some point in time. You know, it is the middle of the Indy 11 season. They're on the road against Atlanta United 2 tomorrow night. Then the OKC Energy on Saturday. The next game that I will have is the team against Memphis that comes up a week from Saturday. If we're just in the shameless self-promotion part of the broadcast, I get to have the call of the IFCA North-South Football All-Star Game, which resumes after a year away. That's at Anderson University this year on Friday night. That can be seen on a television channel that you don't work for, so I won't make you say it. I'll simply say on the ISC Sports Network. But no, just engaging in good-natured conversation. We can talk about Dreamland Barbecue if you want to. I'm up for any and all conversation.
Now, the 11 took on Birmingham. When was that on? What day was that on?
Saturday night.
And what was the outcome of that contest, Rake?
The Legion come in and get a 1-0 victory, the exact reversal of the season opening game at BBVA Field in Birmingham. The Legion are a quality soccer club. This is their 3rd year in existence. They are back in first place in the Central Division. Indy's one of 8 teams in the Central. But Birmingham has put together a really good team. And I didn't get to share this note in the broadcast on Sunday, so I'm glad I brought you up. The folks in the Brickyard Battalion, the Indy 11 kind of official cheering section supporters groups, made it a point on Facebook over the weekend to say that by far the nicest fans when they have traveled so far were from Birmingham. How engaging they were, how welcoming they were. I don't think any Legion fans made the trip to Indianapolis for the game on Saturday, but just so you know, the fans from your hometown have won a place in the hearts of the Indy 11 faithful.
Well, that's what's good about the good folks of the South. Now, I've lived here 22 years now, so I'm a Hoosier, but I was born, in the South. And that's one of the things they talk about at Dudy Noble Field in Starkville. The outfielders for the other team will talk about how they just take all kinds of hell during the game, and then as soon as the game's over, they give them a plate. They give them a plate of barbecue and say, "Hey, we're just having fun with you." So it is funny how Southern fans really love their sports. Now, I understand the Legion; they're coached by Nick Saban, correct? He took on those duties, and that's why they're doing so well.
He actually is the head coach of the Birmingham Legion, the Birmingham Barons. I think he coaches women's tennis at UAB, and of course the football team in Tuscaloosa. Yes, he covers all of his bases. Yes, sir.
We're talking to Greg Rakestraw, the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. I don't know, you would know far better than I, but a surprising parting of the ways with Coach Rennie and midseason with the Indy 11. How has the team responded? Have you seen any type of change in the on-the-field product since his sudden departure?
We did in the first 2 matches, not so much in match number 3. In other words, one of the critiques or knocks against Barton's teams were that they were not very high scoring. We didn't find back to that as often as they should. And it was a team that in Barton's last 2 matches did not score. Losses to good teams in both Pittsburgh and El Paso, not in that order, but still, the next 2 matches out, Indy scored 5 times. Now they have gone a match and a half without scoring. It's kind of fallen back into a bit of a scoreless run. Matt Garrod is taking over as...
Hey, Rake, let me interrupt you. Something's gone awry with our connection. You sound like you're living in a bubble.
My cell on Tuesdays because this cell phone goes in the crapper like every 10 minutes. And apparently Broad Ripple is a cell phone dead spot.
Okay, Rake, I'm going to have to cut it short with you because something's amiss. if you want to call back later, feel free. But thanks for the congratulations on the Bulldogs. Thanks for always having a good chatter. We'll look for you in that ball game coming up this week in Anderson. And even in that game, remember, Rake, nobody is ever forced to punt. That's one of the many topics we can address with our next guest on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. You know him from a long-time career at RTV6. Now he's with IndyCar. He went and got himself a real job. He's Dave First. Dave, what's going on, buddy?
I had to grow up. I had to get out of the TV business. I feel like a full-on adult now.
I would say that the worst part is probably getting up at a reasonable hour like most people do.
I think you were one of the first I texted after I started my new position in the communications department with IndyCar. And I think there was a race coming up, and I think I need to get a hold of you about something. I think I texted you at like 9 in the morning. And you immediately, well, I shouldn't say immediately, but you got back to me on usual sportscaster hours, like around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and said, boy, your hours sure have changed.
That was my first thing.
Yeah.
That was my condolences. Now, how long were you at RTV?
23 years.
Wow. Well, I know they had a great send-off for you, and you did so many good things, and I was never ashamed to tell you how much I respected all the work you did over there. Actually quite happy to see you leave and not be a competitor anymore, but you've got the great gig now. What has been as we talked about earlier, I was talking about being a fan of Mississippi State and being able to engage as a fan. Has being focused on one thing now, and that being the IndyCar series, has that allowed you to find more of your fandom for other things now that you're watching and not having to worry about getting post and writing a package or VOSOT for?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, I watch the Pacers with a little different eye, for sure, cheering on those guys. And part of it is, and you get to know almost everyone within the organization. So it's not just, the players, it's the people behind the scenes that work so hard to, whether it's helping the media or sales or whatever the side of the industry is. And the same with the Colts. And, watching them last year, I was hoping that I would actually be able to go to a couple games in person, but, COVID kind of dictated that. So I'm looking forward to, as things get back to a little bit more normalcy, being able to take the family and my 10-year-old Zach to some more Pacer games, Colts games. We move forward.
Well, the one thing about your new job with the Pacers is you still get to flex that broadcaster muscle as you're leading some of these Zoom meetings with drivers and whatnot, but also you do some cool stuff at the tracks. Tell us about, those kind of like pit walks or track walks you do out there.
Yeah, so each and every week I get to kind of preview the race that's coming up. So at Mid-Ohio last week, it was about a 2.5-minute video. I just kind of went over some of the the finer points or things to watch, and that's what we call it. We call it 3 things. We separated, kind of dummy the weekend down to what really matters. What should fans be watching? And it's, we'll cut segments in and around the track, or like we did in Mid-Ohio, it was just one continuous shot of me walking through pit road, and it's fun, and that's exactly what it is. I'm kind of flexing my broadcasting muscle a little bit, and I must admit, sometimes that's the most normal thing I do during the course of a day. I'm like, oh, okay, I can do this sort of thing in my sleep. But no, it is fun, and we've gotten great engagement as well on Twitter, Facebook, the IndyCar app powered by NTT Data. It's all in there, and we've gotten great response from it. So we're going to continue it the last 6 races of the season coming up.
What's funny is some people in your position years past with not just the series but in other walks of life, the last thing they'd want to do is be on camera. And that's the thing. You're like, hey, fire the camera up. Where's the mic? Let's go do it.
It's everybody I work with, I tell them, this is the most normal thing I do during the course of the week. They'll look at me like, really? I'm like, oh, this is great. I can do this. We're
talking with Dave First, formerly with RTV, now with the IndyCar series. Let's look back on your long career, 23 years as a sportscaster here in town. As some of the things you look around and go, okay, that's a moment maybe when I was working and hated the long hours, I didn't realize how special that was. What are some of the things you covered in that time when you're like, wow, that I was lucky to be a part of that?
Well, I mean, you were there too when the Colts won the Super Bowl in Miami, and we were. I mean, we're all working, we're all doing our thing, we're all concentrating on our job. But right after you and you and I have a Marvin Harrison story, but maybe we want to get into it, maybe we don't. But after that moment, we all went to the locker room because the players didn't stick around on the field after the game very long because it was raining. We were all drenched, so they all went to the locker room, and that's where a lot of us went after the game to get post-game interviews, to quickly turn it around for the newscast. Remember, it's a late game, so it was a quick turn to get ready for the 11 o'clock news or 10 o'clock news. And all of a sudden, all the players were in there, and Tony Dungy walks in, and they were going to have a post-game prayer. And all the players got on their knees, and I'm thinking, I have no business being in this room at this particular moment of history with this organization. So I'm getting ready to turn and kind of politely step out of the room, and Dungy turned to the reporters that were there and insisted that we stay because in our own little way, we were a part of that season and the history that was involved in it and the special moment that we had just witnessed. And so that was the coolest for me to have Tony say, no, stay. I'm like, okay, if it's up to you, coach, whatever you want. And so that was probably one of the moments that I always think back on. I'm like, what a special little nugget of history that I was able to be involved in. But when you do it for 23 years, and Chris, how long have you been doing it now?
I've been it'll be 22 years in November.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's any number of stories like that. And it's not all wrapped around the Colts or the Pacers or, Purdue, IU, Ball State. I mean, there are so many. Sometimes you go out to the high school game on a Friday night and you see a coach that you become friends with, and there's a moment there that maybe something's going on in their family, or makes a point of telling you about a player or something like this. It's just there's all sorts of great moments like that, and for us to be able to be the conduit to fans and to help tell those stories, I think is a pretty special occupation to have.
Yeah, that's the thing. You think about the relationships and then the things you're privy to. Even like, last August, the Indy 500, no fan, and I was there, and I said, to myself and on the air, I said, hey, this is not something that I just take for granted or another day at the office. There are, thousands of people that their streak of going to 500s has been interrupted, and generations of fans that, they would do anything to be here. And you meet some people and you say, I've been to, hundreds of Colts games. You meet people that never got a chance to go to a Colts game. So it's not something I take for granted. But you talk about special moments that you don't feel like you belong in. And in 2000, when the Pacers beat the Knicks and they're Eastern Conference champions, I was in that locker room, and the guy, I don't know if he works for the league or for whom he works, he has the box and he's passing out the Eastern Conference Pacers hats and the T-shirts. And I look at him, he's giving them all, and I look at him, and I didn't ask for one, but I think he could tell in my eye, hey, I'd like to have one. He gives me the T-shirt, and the hat, which I still have. And I remember I wore the T-shirt the following year to training camp. This is when I was still doing some shooting as well. I had on the Pacers Eastern Conference T-shirt from that very box. And Reggie Miller, he's getting ready to do his interviews. You know how he kind of sits down and he sees me and he pauses and he says, "Wear that shirt with pride." And you could tell he wasn't making a joke. He like knew how hard it was to get there, and it was almost as if he was saying like, "Hey, don't just put that shirt on to go to work. You need to wear it with pride." But we're talking with Dave First, a great career with RTV, now with IndyCar, and you think about when you're trying to promote a series and get things out there, you think about, okay, what are our talking points? What are we? And you think about the IndyCar series. We've known how competitive it's been. We've known how it's got a global roster of drivers. And then you see, what do we got? Only 2 drivers have won multiple races this year. It took this weekend for Team Penske to get its first win of the season. I mean, this thing, you got the older group, you got the younger group, and each and every week you go out there, you're like, man, this is really up for grabs. There are 15, if not more, drivers that could win this thing.
It's been, and I heard Roger Penske say this recently. This season is as competitive as it probably has ever been, and I know there are other seasons out there where there have been more, or at least when it comes to different winners in a season. But I mean, here we are, 10 races into the season. We've had 8 different winners. We've had 4 first-time winners. This young group of Renus VK and Pato O'Ward and Colton Herta. This is generational talent. This to me is like '99 when you had the likes of Greg Moore and Juan Pablo Montoya coming up, and these guys are going to be. This current crop is going to be winning races for a long, long time, and. If it's not for Alex Palou, I didn't mention Alex. He's our points leader right now. He's up 39 points on Pato O'Ward. If it's not for these young guys, Scott Dixon would be cruising to his 7th NTT Series championship right now. And oh, by the way, Scott's 3rd in points. So I mean, he's still very much a part of this championship. So this is some pretty special stuff. If you're a race fan or a casual race fan, and the racing has been absolutely unbelievable. At Road America a couple of weeks ago, I think we counted it up. We had over 200 passes. It was like the most passes since the series had been there since it returned to Road America in 2016. By the way, just did a multi-year deal with them. So the series is going to be racing up at Elkhart Lake for the next several years. But it really is special to watch. And I mean, who knows? The modern day record for different winners in a season is 11. And right now we're sitting at 8. And, Will Power hasn't won a race yet. Simon Pagenaud hasn't won a race yet. There are several other guys like they could easily win a race. So we could be looking at least tying or maybe breaking that record by the time the season wraps up at Long Beach.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You got some studs that are still looking for that first win. So, but because of different circumstances, a prolonged break now, more than a month until they run down in Nashville. And that's an event that really intrigues me. We talked with Joseph Newgarden, who's from very near Nashville, and about how excited he is and what kind of event it's going to be. You'll do your, 3 things about that circuit there, but on the streets, the Long Bridge, that looks like something that could be something like we've not seen in quite some time.
I agree. We get to go over a river a couple of times on that layout, and it's going to be quick. I mean, I think we're going to see speeds over that bridge, close to 160, 170 miles. I don't know. If even they've quite figured out what this is going to look like in terms of how good the racing is going to be. I mean, and they're going to fan out. That area is not exactly a tight racetrack, so they could easily fan out 3, 4, maybe 5 wide as they get into turn number 1 there at Nashville. So, and that's just part of what that weekend is going to look like. What they've billed it as really is more than just a race, more than just practice, more than qualifying. It is an event. There's going to be concerts. So, it is Nashville, so there's going to be country music concerts and other events going on. It's very much an international city, and Nashville is set to shine, no question. And just, you talked to Joseph after the race on Sunday at Mid-Ohio. He's to the point now where he said this cannot miss. This thing is going to be off the charts good. It's going to be perhaps the Long Beach type feel for our neck of the woods, and I think it's going to be a fantastic show. The problem is we got to wait for it for a couple of weeks. Yeah. It's going to be in August, so but it's going to be worth the wait.
We haven't seen speeds on that bridge since you and Dave Marin were trying to make a live shot there for a Colts-Titans game.
That's right. Right, we've all been there. We've all been there. No, only some of us are smart enough that after a game on Sunday to go ahead and stick around in Nashville that night instead of driving back.
Yeah. That's what, we talked about some things we could say on the radio and things we could say on the Adults Only podcast at some point, but that's down the road. Hey, Dave, I know you're on vacation. I appreciate you taking some time to help us fill in for JMV. And like I said, always admired your work. You did a tremendous job. You're missed on the airways, but it's nice to get a little taste when we see a Zoom or we see your
right.
pre-race videos there on the Twitter. So check Dave out on the Twitter, and we will talk to you soon, and hopefully see you down there in Nashville. It's Stephen Holder from The Athletic. You've been reading his stuff for years here in town on the Colts beat, and now you get to see him, his handsome face, his cool clothes on the Blue Zone with us pregame for the Colts. He's Stephen Holder. Stephen, I can't give you a better introduction than that, my friend.
You can. I mean, that's a great introduction for just Stephen Holder.
Thank you. How about the guy? It's just Chris Hagan.
Stephen Holder.
I had to drive down here. Hey, we were talking, I don't know if you heard before, we were talking about, kind of our mission statement as journalists or broadcasters when it comes to being the voice of the fans. And I was talking about how when I watch a game, I'm looking for different content than you are. You have a long form. I'm looking for those sound bites, and I'm trying to, when I see a game and it's 4th and 1 and they go for it rather than kick the field goal, I try to say, okay, fans want to know what that was. So that's when you'll try to find out those answers. For you, in addition to doing the nuts and bolts, you're trying to find some feature stories, some in-depth things that people, don't necessarily have access to. And even though you're not, you didn't grow up here, you're not a diehard Colts fan. You kind of have to be the voice of those fans that have been here forever, and that is a responsibility, is it not?
Oh, for sure, no question about it. I think whatever the case might be, whether it's a game, whether it's a Wednesday when nothing's going on, generally speaking, I think what you're always trying to do is you're trying to tell people something they don't already know, hopefully, right? Or at least explain why something happened. They might already know what happened, but you want to be able to shed some light on that. So hopefully they walk away, having gained some knowledge or an understanding or something out of the whole deal, because otherwise, we're wasting their time, right? So that would suck. So, yeah, I there's no question, though. You're right. I think when, particularly in a tight game, I mean, the playoff game, for example, right, the Colts playoff game, I mean, there were lots of subplots there. And I think as all of us, right, we're watching that and we're thinking through those scenarios and what are the pertinent questions. And that's what we spent the entire post-game, press conference talking about, because that's what the fans clearly would want to know, right? So that's kind of how we do business. And I think, we do think like a fan, even though we're not fans. We think like a fan because we work for the fans. Yeah,
and then, like I said earlier, Joe Blow off the streets can't go up to Frank Reich and say, why isn't Nyheim Hines getting more touches? And there has to be, you have to have a delicate way, because you're not just going to question Frank Reich and then never have to talk to him again. You have to present your questions in a way that you're representing the fan, but also not alienating people who say, well, I'm not talking to this Holder guy again because he's a jerk.
Right. I always tell people, I think the fans want to channel their anger through you sometimes, right? Or anger or joy, right? Whatever. Like, they want to channel their emotions through you, except, as you just outlined, it doesn't work that way, right? I always tell people, hey, I got to go back in the locker room tomorrow, buddy. Okay? Okay? It's like, I'm playing the long game here, okay? Trust me.
That's what I tell people when people say, oh, you're so lucky you go to all the games. And I say, well, yeah, but if the home team's losing 35-0, the fan can leave and go get barbecue. I have to stay there and then go in there and talk to them afterwards and question them about it. So, yeah, everything has its pluses and minuses when you think about it like that.
Right. I always tell people, another thing I always tell people is, I'm not going to tell you like we're splitting atoms here, right? Okay. I mean, look, God didn't bless me with that kind of knowledge or intellect. At the same time, the job does have its challenges. And I always tell people, look, man, until you've gone into a losing locker room full of 300-pound men, okay, don't tell me how to do my job, okay? Because trust me, you've never done that, okay? I assure you, you've never done that.
There's nothing worse, too, when if it's the season-ending loss in the playoffs, and when you make eye contact with somebody and they know you're walking up to talk to them. So you make that initial eye contact, and you can see in their face like, oh God, like the last thing they want to do.
There it comes.
And you're like, hey, I'm sorry about this. Listen, hey, just real quick here. But yeah, it is, and that is something that you have to be the conduit because you and I after games are worried about deadlines and whatever. But there are fans out there that are feeling real pain. Investment, dollars into merchandise and the tickets and like just their emotional investment. And there are people feeling that pain as well. So we talk, you're right. It's quote, it's just Chris Hagan and it's just sports, but so many people get invested into that. It means a lot to them. We're talking with Stephen Holder from The Athletic. He does great work there. And Stephen, I'm not asking you to quote these, but I know I've seen in my email and all this kind of stuff, there's so many great offers right now to jump on with The Athletic. It's well worth it. So if there's ever a time to jump on and be privy to all your great content and the stable of writers you have, now's the time.
Yeah, I hope so. I think, we're always trying to find sort of a different angle or something interesting. I'm sitting here today working on a story that I think we'll post tomorrow on the Colts offensive line and the finances of that, which is boring stuff generally, but it's really important. And I think I found a little bit of an interesting way to look at it. So that's just an example of, the kinds of things that we try to do. And I think this is going to be one heck of a season to cover the Colts because, and I'm not just talking about reading it in The Athletic, but just generally, I think this is going to be one heck of a season to be on the Colts beat because you've got, just one of the biggest stories in the NFL, I think, is Carson Wentz. There's no question about it. Whether it goes great or whether it's a complete train wreck, it's going to be one of the biggest stories in the NFL. And then you've just got generally a Colts team that, if the cards fall right, I mean, this team could do some things this year. I don't know what that means and what that entails, but they have a chance. They have a lot of talent. So I'm really looking forward to it. And obviously the stadium being full again. So, I mean, there's no question. Look, I'm taking a little downtime now, but I am very much looking forward to this season. I think it's just full of great plot lines and storylines that we'll be covering. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, you think about, the franchise rolled the dice on Phillip Rivers and, they hit the jackpot there as far as getting what you expected, if not more, out of him. And now they do it 2 years in a row, going with Carson Wentz, a guy that, obviously a number 2 pick overall, and a franchise doesn't just give him away unless they thought, that ship had sailed. So there are some question marks, but from talking with guys that I have in this offseason since the little, abbreviated OTAs, the inside the locker room guys, it's all been positive as far as him saying the right things and doing the right things and looking the right way, but we won't find out until they hit the field for real. Yeah,
and I think the one thing that Carson has going for him, and I've been on the radio in Philly a bunch this spring and summer because, let me tell you, they have a lot of thoughts on Carson Wentz.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do.
So anyway, what I've told people is, look, I don't know how Carson's going to play, and I don't know if he can be that MVP type player again. I have no idea. But here's what I do know. I do know that he doesn't have to be that type of player. I don't think he does with this team. Now, he's got to be good for this team to go places, but I think they got a good enough team around him that his job is to not screw it up.
Right.
In my opinion, and I think he can do that. I think Frank Reich can put him in position to do that. And, I've gone back and watched a lot of tape of Carson Wentz. And while I'm no quarterback coach or anything, I see a lot of the problems, right? I know what people are talking about, and I understand it. But I also see a guy who has some skills that you can't teach. You can't teach a guy to throw the ball like Carson Wentz can throw it. And you can't teach a guy to use his legs the way Carson Wentz is capable of doing. Just lots of the things that he does well, I think, are things that can help you win as a quarterback. And he's got to balance that with the things that he struggles with. Like, one of the things that he does very clearly do is he gets flustered under pressure. But, hey, guess what? You got a great offensive line in front of you. Lucky you. So, I mean, I just really think that this is the situation for Carson Wentz to succeed. If he can't succeed here, then I don't know that he can anywhere. because this is a perfect situation for him.
Yeah, he's definitely set up when you think about the coaching staff, the relationships there, and then the talent around him. If you can't do it here, you might as well just head back to North Dakota. Talking with Stephen Holder from The Athletic on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. You mentioned you got a little downtime, and that's thanks in large part to the Colts taking this huge 2-month break between their abbreviated OTAs and training camp. That's when you're really trusting players. I talked with Quentin Nelson last week, and he's still going into the facility. He's living here in town. He's getting his work done. You're putting a lot of trust in these guys, but at the end of the day, they are professionals. They know this is their livelihood. You have to trust them to make sure when they show up to training camp, it's not like they're starting from square one as far as having put in their work.
Yeah, there's two things that you have to consider here, two variables, and one of them is you have to trust that, as you said, that you got the right type of players who are conscientious, players who are responsible, and understand what's at stake. Because there's the other thing is that they're going to have a pretty intense training camp. I mean, first of all, it's going to be long, just based on the schedule I've seen. That's the longest training camp I've seen in my 8 years here. So that's the one thing. But then there's also the reality that you've got to be ready, and no one's going to wait on you, okay, especially if you're not a frontline player. You can't run the risk of not being ready, because somewhere out there, your competition is working. And your competition can be another team. Your competition can be somebody who's fighting for a roster spot with you, somebody who's in a position battle for a starting job, whatever. The competition is working, okay, because somewhere out there, somebody's doing what they need to do. And they're coming for your job. They're coming for your team. Whatever it is. So you have to have that understanding. And I think most NFL players, they don't make it to this level unless they have embraced that approach, because you aren't taking many days off as a professional athlete. It's just not in your nature. So, I do think the Colts have a team full of guys who have the right makeup and have demonstrated that. So I think they're going to be fine. And they did get a little bit of a heads up that, hey, this training camp's not going to be, anything to write home about. It's going to be tough. And that was told to them. And I think that's a product of the abbreviated offseason that you mentioned. So they may have gotten a break in May and June, but I think they're going to pay for it later maybe. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, it looks like an extra week up there. And, of course, you have the joint practices with Carolina. But so, yeah, there'll be no downtime once they hit the ground running. Let me ask you this. Last year, maybe some surprise when you talk about Hot Rod getting the place-kicking job, replacing Adam Vinatieri. Now, I mean, are we going to have another competition, or is this just – are they trying to light a fire under him? What do you think will there be any drama, I guess, on cut day when we start looking at the specialists, most in particular the place kicker?
We'll see. I do think that they did the right thing by bringing in competition because, look, if you've got 1 year of experience in the league, I don't think you've earned the right necessarily to not have competition. Okay. Right. I'm just being honest. I mean, whether you think he kicked well or not last year, I think that's just a fact. And I don't think they want anybody to ever get too comfortable. And so I think they did the right thing there. The other thing is, so Hot Rod, it's a little bit frustrating watching him because, I think at short distances, he tends to be pretty accurate. But the question I have, though, is on the longer kicks, the leg strength is my question. And I don't know that you would gain more by getting another kicker with a stronger leg, but maybe less accuracy elsewhere. I don't know if that offsets it, right? And I think that's the question that they have to figure out. I'm not suggesting that his job is in danger. I think they've been pretty clear that, they like Rodrigo and it's his job to lose. But, yeah, I mean, I think you got to think of everything, and you can't leave any stone unturned. I will say there are – in the NFL, you got to be able to hit from 50 yards pretty consistently. And I think Blankenship there have been some questions about that, I guess is what I'm saying. So that's a pretty big question to have. And I think they're doing the right thing by at least exploring their options.
Yeah, it's like in baseball. Do you want the shortstop who's going to make every routine play and never
right.
have an error, or do you want the guy that maybe he's going to make the spectacular play? How much do you put into that? And how many times are the Colts going to be involved in a game where, hey, you need a 54-yarder here to force overtime. You need a 54-yarder here to win this because, as you said, routinely accurate on most of the time when you think about those kicks that I don't want to say don't matter, but on some of these kicks where you're like, hey, this is going to be a critical situation. How much faith do you have in him? And I think last year when you think about how much time he lost because of the COVID, when you talk about the preseason and all, not getting some of those kicks that really didn't matter, I think that maybe set him back a little bit, and we'll see how that goes. Stephen Holder, before we let you go, I've been talking about, as you well know, I love Mississippi State, and they won the College World Series. But I defend myself by saying before I was a sportscaster, I was a sports fan. So I'm curious, before you were a sports writer and you were just a sports fan, what is your best sports memory as a young fan or maybe even a little bit older?
Oh, there's no question. I always go back to 1984, growing up in South Florida. I mean, Dan Marino, I think second, third year goes to the Super Bowl. I mean, I was pretty young at the time, but I mean, I'll never forget it. And to this day, and obviously it's a Sunday night, to this day, I still hold it against my mother. She made us go to the evening service that day on Super Bowl Sunday with the Dolphins in the Super Bowl. Like, what is wrong with this woman? And so I missed like the first quarter, and I've gotten over my hatred of my mother as a result of this, but like, I still hold it against her. I don't hate her, but like,
That's a true test of faith, though. That she was testing your faith.
It really is. It really is. Like, God would understand, right?
Yeah, I think he'd give you a pass. But it's one of those things, too, when those are the memories, and that's what I was saying when Mississippi State won the national championship. Like, I was crying just because I was remembering the 13-year-old kid watching them lose in the College Worlds. I was thinking of all the losses I've sat through, like dreaming one day in my lifetime. You say, one, like a guy called earlier, one day in my lifetime I'll see this. So to actually see it in my lifetime, that's when it puts you in touch with your true sports fan before this became a profession.
Right. And then the one additional related memory, I guess the same year would be, the next year, I guess. I remember my dad let me stay up a little late to watch the Monday Night Football game, 85 Bears and the Dolphins.
Oh,
so
yeah.
That was a treat.
A lot of Bears
fans.
Fans in the area, and they don't want to hear that from you, Stephen.
That's right. The one blemish.
That's what I said earlier. For every great memory you have about sports, there's somebody on the other side of that still breaks their heart. But that's why we're sports fans. Stories like that, nobody tells them better like you, Stephen Holder from The Athletic. We appreciate the time, bud.
All right, man. Anytime.